What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Kevin Hoops Show. I am the host here, Kevin Hoops, and we're talking Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Is it going to happen this year? When is it going to happen if it is? And who's going to come out on top? There's a lot of questions here, and I think that these questions need to be answered. Before we answer them, though, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. But without further ado, Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, arguably two of the best combat fighters that we have seen in the UFC. At least that's my opinion, and everyone has one. To be honest, though, I really do think that Jon Jones is the GOAT in the UFC. He is probably, if not the best mixed martial artist we have seen in MMA in general. I'm talking UFC, I'm talking Bellator, I'm talking the PFL, I'm talking every single combat sport you can possibly have. When it comes to mixed martial arts, Jon Jones is the deadliest guy walking on planet Earth. And the only argument you can give to that is Francis Ngannou. But the thing that I will say to that is when you look at it, it seems like Francis Ngannou ran away from the fight. And if he's that much of a bitch, I think Jon Jones is going to whoop his ass if that fight ever does happen. And to be real, I really do think that fight can happen in the future. It's just more or less, when is it going to happen? Will Francis Ngannou stop being a bitch and come back to the UFC? Now, on the other side, I do think that Stipe is a GOAT in his own right. I think when it comes to the heavyweight division, in this current era, I think Stipe is 110% the GOAT of the heavyweight division. Now, some people might have other guys like Cain Velasquez, and I completely agree with you. I don't think that Cain Velasquez is not a GOAT. I think Cain Velasquez is definitely at the top front of GOATs in the UFC heavyweight division, along with a few other names. But when it comes to current time, I think the best person we've seen at heavyweight, other than Jon Jones and maybe Francis Ngannou, is Stipe Miocic. Not only has he fought guys like Mark Hunt, Junior Dos Santos, Francis Ngannou, he's fought every guy underneath the sun when it comes to this heavyweight division. And in my opinion, I really do think that with 3 title defenses, he is the GOAT of the UFC before Jon Jones came along. Some people might make the argument about the DC loss and DC becoming the heavyweight champion. But what I'll say to that is DC only had 1 defense at heavyweight, and that was against Stipe in their rematch, and he lost it. And with him losing that, I just don't think that it's necessarily as impressive as 3 title defenses at heavyweight from Stipe Miocic. And I think that Stipe Miocic not only has the 3 title defenses on his side, but he also is a well-rounded fighter. We saw in the Francis fight, when Francis got taken down, he didn't have an answer for it. And I think that's just good game planning on Stipe's side. He does have a good amount of knockouts in his career either way, and I do think that when he mixes both, he just looks like a really overall good fighter, and I think it's hard to beat him when he's using both to his advantage. So I think that it is going to be somewhat of a hard fight going up against Jon Jones for both of these guys. And I have to tip my hat to Jon Jones for taking the fight right away with Stipe. He didn't beat around the bush. He didn't run away like Francis Ngannou. He came up and said right away, "Stipe, where are you? I know you've been calling me out. Let's fucking sign the contract."
Y'all want to see me beat up Stipe? One thing I know about the UFC is we give the fans what they want to see. Stipe Miocic, I hope you're training, my guy. You're the greatest heavyweight of all time.
And look where we are, ladies and gentlemen. July 8th, it looks like we're going to have Stipe Miocic versus Jon Jones, and it's going to be a banger. I don't really think we got to see much of the current Jon Jones that we really could have in the Jon Jones versus Cyril Gane fight. You know, we only saw him for about 30 fucking seconds, and then boom, that was it. I think we just could have seen a lot more from Jon Jones at heavyweight just to see what he looked like, to see if he had any ring rust, because even if he does have a little bit of ring rust, we wouldn't really have saw it in the 30 seconds of the fucking fight that we saw. So if anything, I think Jon Jones might have to experience that this coming July when he does fight Stipe, unless he's just that guy, which I do think is also possible, that he just shows up and whoops Stipe's ass and shows no ring rust or anything. I think the possibility is there. It's more or less how much time is Jon Jones putting in in between this last win against Cyril Gane and this upcoming fight with Stipe Miocic. Speaking of ring rust, we haven't seen Jon Jones in the ring before the Cyril Gane fight in about a year, 2 years, and we haven't seen Stipe in the ring in about a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years now since the last Francis fight. And I do think that that is a good argument that you can make for both of these guys, basically. Not only does Jon Jones might still have some ring rust, but Stipe might also have some ring rust because he hasn't fought in so long. And his last fight was a pretty impressive knockout from Francis Ngannou. We really don't know what to expect from either of these guys when it comes to this July 8th fight. It looks like Stipe Miocic might have put on a little bit of weight in the good sense. You know, I'm not saying he's fat, but I'm saying after that Francis fight, he may have realized I need to put on some more weight. I just can't come in at 211, 225 pounds. I have to get to that 250-pound mark to really maximize what I can do in the ring with strength, with speed, and everything. So I think that if Stipe does continue to, put on some weight for this Jon Jones fight, I think it might, help him in the sense of strength, but it might not help him in the sense of his speed, getting used to that weight. If he's used to just fighting at whatever his natural weight is, a little bit above 205, he's going to have more speed than if he's 250, 260 pounds fighting for the belt against a guy like Jon Jones, who's trying to do everything that he can in his power to make sure he's as strong as possible, to make sure that, he's looking as fast as he was at light heavyweight. And, I see him fucking lifting 4 or 5 plates on a bench press and just absolutely killing it in the gym. So I believe that Stipe Miocic is going to be doing the same thing, and it's just a matter of time before we see if these guys are on point when it comes to their cardio, when it comes to their strength, their speed. Now, another thing to talk about, which I think is interesting, is these guys have obviously been through a lot in their careers. Stipe Miocic has been fighting since 2011. Jon Jones is around the same age, and honestly, Jon Jones has been nothing but the champion since he was almost 20, 21 years old, and has been doing nothing but defending the title. I think he has 14, 15 title defenses, which is absolutely insane. Like, not one person comes even close to the amount of title defenses that Jon Jones has, which I think that alone makes the argument that he is the GOAT of the UFC. A thing that I really want to talk about is, everyone has their ticking clock, and eventually it is time to hang up those gloves. And will we see that this July? This could be one of the biggest fights of Stipe's career and possibly even Jon Jones' career. So, will one of these guys, if they win, decide to retire? Or even if one of these guys loses, will they decide to retire? Now, there is also the argument that you can make that whoever wins, whoever loses, it doesn't matter. This fight is so big, there has to be a rematch. Honestly, I've been waiting for this, maybe not waiting for this exact fight, but I'm a big fan of Stipe at heavyweight, and I've been making the argument that he's been one of the best, if not the best, at heavyweight in the UFC. So him fighting one of my favorites and my considered GOAT is just like a dream come true. So the fact that these two are even possibly fighting once is amazing. And the fact that it could happen a second time, in my opinion, is just mind-blowing. Now, maybe they'll fight again for a rematch. Maybe one of these guys will hang it up depending on who wins and who loses. And honestly, if Stipe wins or loses, I think I'm leaning more towards him hanging up the gloves compared to Jon Jones, just because Jon Jones hasn't had a single loss in the UFC. We've seen Stipe Miocic, against DC, against Francis Ngannou the second time. He's gotten caught. And, after getting caught like that against a guy like Francis Ngannou and even a guy like DC, it's just going to change the way you think. It's going to change your confidence. It's going to make you think about where you want to be in the next 5, 10 years. It's going to make you also think about your family, how much time you're going to have left with them and spending time with your kids, with them going to college and them growing up. You do want to spend some of that time there with them. I think that, in my opinion, if we're going to have to pick which guy retires first, my money's on Stipe, just because he already took a 2 or 3 year break, and I know that Jon Jones did, but I think that Jon Jones' reasoning was a little different. I know that he was kind of, taking that break because of the fighter pay and also because he wanted to go to heavyweight. So putting on that weight wasn't necessarily necessarily the easiest thing to do. You know, putting on that type of weight does take some time. 50 to 40 pounds of muscle, even 30 pounds of muscle can take some time to put on. And I do think that, you know, at least a year of that break from Jon Jones was because of just putting on weight for heavyweight. Now, when it comes to who's going to actually take the belt home in July, I do think you can make an argument for both. I don't like choosing both all the time, but I truly am a big fan of Stipe Miocic, and I truly am a big fan of Jon Jones. I started watching these guys on UFC Fight Pass after they have already fought. You know, I was going back 4 or 5 years into their careers just because I was so intrigued by how good these guys were. I knew that Jon Jones was already considered, you know, one of the top guys to ever put gloves on in the UFC, and I was starting to realize that Stipe Miocic was kind of the same way in the heavyweight division. And I really had thought that since, you know, the beginning, that Stipe Miocic is the GOAT currently in this current era of the UFC. He is the heavyweight GOAT, no ifs, ands, or buts, but obviously Jon Jones is here now, and who knows what that argument could be in, you know, a year or two. So honestly, I really don't know who's going to win this fight. I think it's just going to have to be, you know, a coin flip in my opinion, but we've got 3 or 4 months before this fight could even happen. So it's all up in the air right now. Let me know in the comments who you guys think is going to take the win. Let me know who you think is the GOAT in the heavyweight division in the entire UFC. Let me know. I love talking to you guys back and forth in the comments, so let me know. And without further ado, we've got a watch party going on next week on Saturday, April 8th. Tune in. It's going to be going live at around 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to have wings. We're going to have pizza. We're going to have titties. We're going to have laughs. It's going to be a great fucking time overall. Tune in. Hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed this video. And without further ado, have a great fucking day.